Welcome to the WDRB Plus Studio. I'm Chris Otts, a reporter here at WDRB, and today I am joined by Rebecca Fleischaker. She is the executive director of the Downtown Partnership. Rebecca, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we're going to have a long form conversation today about all the aspects of downtown. We're going to talk about the office market and what's been going on there, about the idea of building up the residential base of downtown, getting more people to live in some of these office buildings, whether that's practical and some projects that may be on the horizon. We're going to talk about homelessness. We're going to talk about tourism. We're going to talk about new things that are happening, like reimagining the Belvedere and Derby City Gaming that's coming, so that there's a lot going on. Let's first sort of like establish you are the leader of the Downtown Partnership.
Correct.
What is the Downtown Partnership? And since we have this space to have a conversation, I'm curious if you could also sort of elaborate on why do we need a downtown partnership? You know, there's no Newburgh partnership, there's no PRP partnership.
That's a great question. Yeah.
So why don't we start there?
Okay. So the Downtown Partnership is an umbrella organization, two different entities. Both were created in the early 90s. Downtown Development Corporation, 100% private nonprofit, really looks at the strategic, visionary, 20,000-foot view. What do we want downtown to look and feel like? How do we advocate for downtown? This is where I would work with state and local legislators, more incentives, stuff like that. Then the
Okay.
other side of the house is the management district, and this is created by statute and enabled by ordinance, where we have a business improvement district, very legally defined with boundaries. If you have been downtown, you've seen our men and women in orange polo shirts. They are there to be a welcoming presence. They sweep litter off the sidewalks, cover graffiti in the public realm. That is funded through assessments on properties in that
Right.
area.
It's an extra property tax on
Yeah,
downtown,
we call
right?
it an assessment. But it does pay for things that your property taxes don't pay for. So it's a supplemental cleaning, safety, and beautification.
Gotcha. Well, I think though that is an important point just before we get into it, because people will say, "Look at this special deal that downtown's getting."
Oh, right.
They have the guys coming by sucking up
Yep.
the litter on the sidewalks. I don't see that in my neighborhood, but there's a reason for that,
It's
right?
because it's paid for. And to get to your question, there is no other neighborhood like downtown anywhere in any city. Downtowns are unique and special because it is where your density of commerce, tourism, and hopefully one day for us residential is. And you don't have that mix of uses or that density of uses in any other neighborhood. So you have your big attractions, venues that bring national or international acts. You have your sporting events here, Broadway shows. It's just a different kind of neighborhood. It's where the majority of our hotels are. It's where the majority of our tourists stay. The biggest job center. That kind of neighborhood really necessitates a different kind of treatment. And we were really smart in the early 90s to get this business improvement district created and set upon. And we did expand it a little bit in 2017. We're working on, and it's like a couple blocks, and we're working on another couple block expansion right now. But that helps make downtown more unique and special. So when you talk about ongoing maintenance and care, some of it is what we do. Some of it really is what your property taxes pay for. And that's why we have to work so closely with the mayor, whoever that administration is at the time. And when you're looking for the bigger things, and if you've noticed Mayor Greenberg's legislative priorities, you're asking the state for some of that stuff too. So where really they came together in 2014, and the reason that these entities came together is because the bottom line is the same. We all
Hmm.
want downtown to look and feel good, and that means on the grassroots, on the boots on the ground level, and you need that to attract investors, developers, businesses, employees, which is the economic development part of it, which is what our Downtown Development Corporation side does.
So let's get into it. Let's talk about downtown.
Okay.
How would you? Let's keep this open ended. How would you assess the state of downtown today compared to, say, 2019, before, in the before
Well,
times?
can I just state, I started
Sure.
this job. I came from city to this downtown partnership at the very end of 2021. So through COVID, I was on the city side.
Okay.
I worked a small business grant program. We all felt the stress in the economic development department. everybody felt stressed. But in terms of businesses staying open, especially the small businesses, the retail fronts, that we did not, the mom and pops that we did not want to close. And so a lot of the impact that we saw COVID wise was downtown businesses, and everybody went home. And that was the biggest, to me, that was the biggest, scariest unknown. You know, our downtown was completely empty. When I took this job in 2021, very end of 2021, people were already coming back. I felt a lot of hope and confidence in downtown. We have all the bones of a unique, authentic, very cool, walkable, fun downtown. So I wasn't worried about that. Um, and I do feel like we're not even talking anymore about pre-COVID to now, because a lot of our numbers are higher than pre-COVID. Our tourism
So what's
numbers,
higher?
number of visitors, number of people going to attractions, hotel stays. I mean, we're back at mid 60% occupancy,
Mm-hmm.
super healthy. Conventions are almost back to where we were. Business travel has just slowed down in general because people can do more,
Mm-hmm.
you
Yep.
know, on Zoom.
Uh-huh.
Um, but in terms of numbers of people in downtown, we're seeing gains, and so I'm really heartened by that. It's different people than we had seen in 2019. That's the difference. I still want people to come back to the office. I still want to like to be sitting here with you as a
Mm-hmm.
different kind of conversation than had you said, "Oh, we can just do it by Zoom because it's going to be streamed anyway." It's just, I need people. We are social beings, and being together, and I go blue in the face saying this, walking down the street to a meeting or to lunch, you're going to bump into somebody you know, and you can say, "Oh my God, Chris, I meant to call you. I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to talk about X, Y, and Z, or let's sit down and hammer out something really quick, or give me your card and I'll call you." And then you get to think about things, and it's more expansive. I mean, we talk about creative collisions all the time. You're more collaborative because you're in person, but you do more. You're more expansive because you get to take the time and you feel someone's energy and you
Yep.
share that. So I do think, my hope, my goal, I mean, I can't make anybody do this, but I really hope that employers say, I don't know, 2 years from now, we're back in the office 4 days a week. I
Mm-hmm.
completely understand the request for flexibility. That is what people are demanding now, and I
Mm-hmm.
get it because we can work from home. But is that the best thing for us? I mean, we saw our U.S. Surgeon General declared an epidemic of loneliness, and isolation, and that's a real problem, not only for our mental health, but I mean, I do think our work suffers because of it, and we're suffering personally
Hmm.
because of it. And I think a large part is we all went home, or we all went back to our little niche. The things that a lot of people do are in their own neighborhood, and they're not veering out, and they're not. I'm going to
Yeah.
go off on a tangent here, Chris, but we are a community and we're not seeing all of it. And therefore, our world's got really small, and we're seeing people just like us who think just like us. And
Mm-hmm.
we're not seeing or appreciating the bigger Louisville that we are and that we should love. And I think that you do that in person.
I'm with you. I just think that to some degree, this train has sort of left the station. I
That's
mean,
why I'm hoping for
you know,
4 days a week, not 5.
well, but I think too, also, even if every company leader agreed with what you just said, um, they might not be in a position where they can mandate it,
No, that's
right?
absolutely
I
right.
mean,
That's right.
they can't make people work for them, right?
Yes, but
People have
I
options,
think the
right?
options get fewer when more employers share that same belief. And we've already
Mm-hmm.
seen that happen. So a
Yeah.
year ago, people were leaving jobs to go to remote jobs, and that has already stopped a great deal. Simply because more employers want to see people in the office. And I don't think it's because it's baby boomers who are making this decision, and we're old. I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
baby boomer, but old fashioned, and that's what we want. I really believe that there's um, a gain that we get that I selfishly want for myself to stay home, but it is better for the common good to come into the office. And that's all I'm saying, is that there has to be some consideration for what's good for community, not just Rebecca.
Hmm. Okay. Um, well, let's talk about how downtown has changed.
Okay.
Um, and I'm actually going to throw out a theory that I haven't shared with you
Uh
before, but
oh.
I'm curious what you might think. So I agree with you when you're downtown, particularly like, seventh, eighth block of Main Street. You will see people who are quite obviously bourbon tourists all the time.
Mm hmm.
And I think that is definitely something that has changed for the better
Yep.
for our city. Um, and on the flip side, the presence of the corporate worker, I think, is
Mm-hmm.
clearly much less
Yes.
than it used to be. We see that in the office vacancy
Mm-hmm.
statistics, right?
Yep.
Um, and I actually think that Louisville is maybe in some ways becoming a little bit more like where I'm from, which is New Orleans. Uh, if you look at that city, its number one industry, of course, is tourism,
Mm-hmm.
and doesn't really have much of a corporate base at all. Like their only Fortune 500 company, at least last time I checked, was Entergy, which is the power company there. It
Oh
almost
wow.
doesn't even count in my view. but
Right.
uh, but
They have to be there.
yeah, they got to be somewhere
Right.
around there, right? So I see Louisville, and as least as long as the suburban thing lasts, sort of morphing more into a tourist entertainment style downtown than
Hospitality.
a business centered downtown. And so my questions for you are: number one, do you agree with that assessment? What would you add, subtract? And number two, do you think that's a lasting change or
Um,
temporary?
I agree. There are definitely more tourists, and I do think bourbon drives probably 90% of what we're seeing. I think it's very healthy. I do not think that it is outpacing other things that we should be growing. I think we're catching up because if you remember in the 90s, if you look at the downtown plan, we were trying to get more tourism. Downtown was only a CBD, Central Business District. People were coming in at 8:39 and leaving at 5:30,
Mm-hmm.
and there wasn't anything. I mean, talk about people saying the sidewalks rolled up at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock.
Mm-hmm.
So the Kentucky International Convention Center has expanded twice. We have a lot more hotels. We have a ton more attractions,
Mm-hmm.
specifically around bourbon. So bourbonism has completely changed the face of tourism for the better. And I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a lot more runway on that. I totally agree with what you're saying. However, we cannot leave behind office workers or residential development. So for any strong, healthy downtown, you don't want to be resting on one of those things. You need those three pillars:
Mm.
residential,
Yeah.
office, and tourism. You have to have
Got to be
you got,
diversified, right?
exactly.
Yeah.
You need that diverse mix of uses. And it's more interesting and fun anyway, because you've got different hours of the day that you've got more pedestrian activity on the street, and you bring different kinds of people to the city because of it. We can never let go of having a central business district. I do think that is still internationally the root of every downtown. To be located for an international company or even a national company, to be located in downtown means you're big enough and important enough that that's where you have to be located.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard business leaders say that to me before. Um, Downtown's also important because of all the other commerce around you. I mean, some people, like the lawyers, need the courtrooms. Like that's a little bit different. But to have that synergy of that business mix and that industry mix, there's some commonality around, especially if you're in a club or some kind of organization, being able to go get a drink at a cool bar or a bourbon
Mm-hmm.
distillery experience. It's important for business. It's where a lot of business happens.
Sure.
But even more importantly, it's important for the health of downtown. Where we're behind is residential development. We were behind pre-COVID. I mean,
Yeah.
that COVID had nothing to do with that, but it is something that I think we have a real opportunity now because our Class B and C buildings that have gotten more vacancies in it because businesses are shrinking their footprint and hopefully moving into the towers,
Mm-hmm.
then we've got these great bones that should be redeveloped into some other use in residential that's perfect reuse for them.
Okay, well, let's go right there then. The idea of making downtown into more of a residential place.
Yeah,
And as you said, that's not a new idea.
right.
And when I've asked people in commercial real estate about this, they say like, okay, in theory that sounds great. In practice,
It's
it's
expensive.
really hard because these buildings are not designed, the plumbing, the location of the windows,
Yep.
like would you disagree with any of that? So what makes you think that that's actually a feasible plan and that there's going to be private capital that's going to come in and do that?
I do agree with you specifically on the towers. I think we have to take those off the table as a redevelopment conversation right now because we do have so many of the older mid-rise historic buildings that were built as office buildings: Starks, Marion E. Taylor,
Hmm.
Speed, Kentucky Home Life, Hayburn Building. That's
Yes.
five off the top of my
Yeah.
head.
Yeah.
But
which they're planning to do this at Starks, right?
yes,
But
there's a couple of
it hasn't
plans.
happened yet. It's been a long.
And
So
that's
okay,
that's the challenge, is getting
okay,
the financing for it, which is
sure.
why the incentive is super important. And
Okay, well, let's talk
I'm
about it.
telling the story
All
here.
right. Okay.
The these particular buildings, the way that they were built in the early part of the 20th century, they are offices off of a hallway. So the bones are right because you've got potential apartments off the hallway. There aren't enough plumbing is an issue because you don't have as many toilets, or you have one bathroom for one half of the hall. You don't have a sink, you don't have a kitchen sink, bathroom sink. Where else do you need sinks? I guess that's it.
Basement, maybe. I don't
Yeah,
know.
you need more. You need
Yeah.
more outlets for water in an apartment, in a living
Mm-hmm.
unit, than you do in a business unit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but the windows are okay, and most of those buildings, if not all of them, not all of them, and most of them, you can still open the windows, which I think is the egress ingress fire code.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
towers you can't, but there are ways around that. Other states have figured it out. Kentucky's building code, which follows international building code, has some challenges which could be overcome.
Hmm.
But I don't even think we need to do that until we can build out what we have. Um, but the missing piece is, and why I think commercial brokers say it's so difficult, is because the cost of redevelopment is not neutralized with building a brand new building in a greenfield somewhere.
Hmm.
How do we neutralize that? It has to be subsidy. It has to be an incentive. So the mayor started. He did ask for $8 million in this budget. He got three. So we were working with a $3 million fund.
This is the city budget, right? The Louisville
Correct. The
Metro. I
city
think because we
budget.
have state and city,
Yeah,
so I
yeah,
want to
sorry.
be sure that we're
Mayor
talking
of
about the same thing.
Louisville put in
Yes.
his city budget.
Uh-huh.
And at first, when we were talking about $8 million, and to be clear, I'm saying we as if I'm partner
Uh-huh.
with the city, but I am not. I was in conversations, but we were talking about residential and commercial incentive. When it got shrunk to 3 million, we really kind of started with, okay, we really still want to double down on getting more office workers here. Because when you get employees in downtown, people are going to want to live near where they work. So it kind of comes hand
Mm-hmm.
in hand. Uh, if we can get that spent pretty quickly, I think the mayor wants to go back to Metro Council, ask for another round next year. Who
And
know?
how would that 3 million be spent?
Well,
Okay.
we think commercial. So right now,
Uh-huh.
the way it's been put out, it's been publicized this
Mm-hmm.
way, the Cabinet for Economic Development, the local cabinet, had to go to Metro Council and say this is what we would like to do, because that was part of the budget process.
Mm-hmm.
Commercial incentive for fit out of at least 50,000 square feet of office space, and there's up to $30 per square foot
Yes. Yep.
of
My
improvement,
colleague Marcus
tenant
Green wrote
improvements.
all these details
Yeah.
down, which I have in the folder here.
Yeah.
But basically, it's helping with the transition costs for a business that is coming in and having office
That is correct.
space downtown.
That is correct.
Correct.
Yes.
And this could be a business that's coming from the suburbs to downtown,
Yes.
right? Just not one that's already downtown.
Correct. You cannot
Okay.
already be downtown. But to be clear, we're not going out and like knocking on the doors of suburban companies and saying move downtown.
Mm-hmm.
They would be of their own volition, but they would qualify. Again, and I know we heard from some council people who did not want us stealing from the suburbs. You need that density and that diversity in downtown, because if you don't have a strong downtown, and I didn't talk about this, you don't have a strong city. I know I'm all over the place, Chris. I'm really sorry.
That's
Part of the reason that downtowns are so important is because they generate so much tax revenue,
mm-hmm.
property tax, sales tax, occupational tax, that fund the entire city. And if you don't have a strong downtown, you're going to have less to pay for services that go throughout the entire city. So whether or not you're a user of it, we need you to be a supporter of it. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? I mean, you still have to say, oh, it's important that it's safe and that it's clean and that it looks good, and that yes, rah, we do want businesses in the center city, or it's great to be looking at tourism in the center city. It really matters to everybody.
So I hear you there. And I think Jeff O'Brien, who leads economic development for the city, said recently, you can't be a suburb of nowhere.
Exactly.
Right? That makes a lot of sense.
Suburban.
Right.
Yes.
Right. You gotta
Yeah.
have the urban part, right?
Right.
I could also see people saying that it seems short-sighted if we're going to spend any public money to help a business that we already have in this community just move from somewhere else to downtown. I mean, we don't, I think we have some kind of compact or agreement or something where we don't do this with Southern Indiana,
Right.
right?
We
We
do.
can't,
Yep.
we can't like give a bunch of incentives to
We
get
call
a
that
business.
river hopping.
Yes,
Yeah. No
right.
river hopping
But even
allowed.
within Louisville Metro now, we're potentially subsidizing
Well,
businesses to move. Is that defensible in your view?
I do feel like it's defensible today. I mean, as a long-term forever strategy, no.
Okay.
And the state incentive is what is not allowed for river hopping because that's a
Right.
longstanding policy, and I believe it's written into statute.
Mm-hmm.
At least how the incentive works is written into statute. I think now though, where we're trying to strengthen downtown, I do think, I mean, $3 million would reap more benefits than that if we got somebody into downtown to that would generate more property value, sales tax, occupational tax. I don't think that's a really good policy long term, but it's defensible for now.
Mm.
I do think we needed to start with commercial because of our office vacancies. And how do we, I mean, otherwise our property values continue to go down and we'll continue to lose money.
Mm-hmm.
And we cannot do that. So we have got to stand strong where we are. And how do we help that? And this is how you help that.
I see.
And I would like to see that move to residential conversion, which is what the mayor has asked the state and in his priorities for the state budget.
Right.
A very large amount of money for residential conversions, which could go a long way to leveling out that playing field, neutralizing that cost difference of developing in downtown versus a greenfield.
Now, how do you see that money being deployed? Are you familiar with the
The
ins and
state
outs of
money?
it? Yes, and the idea of the residential conversions, and I think we should say that that's just what the Democratic mayor of Louisville has asked the Republican legislature for. We can't. It's far too soon to say whether
Nobody knows.
we're going to actually get that 30 million. Right.
That is absolutely correct. However, I mean, we saw Jason Nemus support the mayor's legislative priorities, which I think is something we haven't seen in a long time.
He's a member of the House leadership and represents
I think he's majority
Eastern
whip.
Jefferson County as well as Oldham County. Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's an important voice to be heard. Julie Rocky Adams, who's a Senate leader in the Senate,
Mhm.
also is supportive of this mayor's request for downtown in general in Louisville. And I think so I don't know exactly how the mechanism would work if that's what you're
Mhm.
asking, because it could work in a couple of different ways. It could be a
Right.
property tax abatement. It could be some sales tax on building stuff, like because that exists right now, but it could allow more. That could go to it. It could be just a per door number of dollars of development that
Mhm.
goes to a developer. I think part of the
Or
magic of
per residential unit or something.
yeah, that's what I
like
meant by
yeah.
per
Yeah,
door.
okay, gotcha.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Now I sound like a developer.
yeah.
Um,
Just trying to be sure the
yeah.
audience follows us here.
Well, it could be per square foot, but that's a
Yeah.
little bit difficult. But if you do it per residential dwelling unit, I
Sure.
mean, then I think a developer can start to pencil out what works
Mhm.
for them. And I think it's important that we talk to developers to see what would actually make a difference, because the whole purpose of an incentive is to get from a project not quite working to making it go.
Mm.
And that's where you want to spend your public money. It's either first in to be an example and set policy, or it's last in to close that gap to make it possible.
Do you think that without this subsidy, the special funding, that the dream of making downtown more residential has any hope of working out?
I mean, I know I don't want to say never, but it would take a lot longer and a lot more dollars from the
Mm.
private sector that I just don't see coming at this point. I think a lot of people believe in downtown. I think a lot of people want to do this, but it simply does not. It's hard to put your capital stack together and make that math work when it's so much more expensive. You're not going to make money on a project, and that's their job. They need to make some money, and I don't expect any developer to be getting rich off of a downtown residential conversion project.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Let's talk about a couple other things that are going on in and around downtown or issues that. So we're about to have it looks and feels like a casino. It's not a casino.
Not a casino.
It's sort of a casino. The Derby City Gaming
Yep.
facility. I think that'll probably be open 24/7.
Not yet, but
But
it's possible.
let me tell you, every time I look at the stats on those machines, they are like a license to print money. I mean, it is unbelievable how much Kentuckians have wanted to go and sit at
Yep.
these machines and I want to say gamble. I guess they're betting on horses technically when they're playing these slot style
Right.
machines. Historical horse racing is the term. But due to the success of that, they're building a new facility downtown. It's been in the works and it's gonna open
December
soon.
5th,
What are the
6th.
ramifications of that for downtown in your view?
Oh my gosh, I think, well, they chose an amazing corner. So they are
Mm-hmm.
catty corner from the convention center, which was by design. So you said
Mm-hmm.
Kentuckians want to spend their money. It will be
Mm-hmm.
a lot of non-Kentuckians, new money to the state, spending money on, I think,
Right.
on these machines. Um, The facility for them is on the small side, but it's beautiful. I mean, nice finishes, nice amenities. It is gorgeous. You can walk in and get a drink. You can walk in and stay as long as you want in bed. I mean, it's going to be open to whoever wants to go into it. I think it's going to be a huge boon to that corner. That, if you haven't seen Fourth and Market, they already have their video board up. That thing is
Yeah.
going to be lit up
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like a Christmas tree. I'm very excited because I
Yeah.
think for me, lighting, we can talk about that in a little
Mm.
bit, is one of our strategies for pedestrian safety and friendliness and making things look cool
So,
and
so the video
different.
board will actually help with with the
Well,
street
the
lighting. Is that
video
what you're
board
saying?
and other lighting. I mean,
Yeah.
there will be a lot. I mean, the regular street lights, because those will go
Yeah.
back in. They'll be brand new and working. Because I know you're going to ask me about street lights. But I think that when there is a level of care given to
Mhm.
any area, that it's treated differently. It's like when you're dressed up, you act a little differently. When you're in a space that is obviously manicured, someone's paying attention, you might be on camera. I actually don't know if you are or not. Um, but you behave differently, and I think there will be it's a kind of a shot in the arm for how we respect our own downtown. I've heard two ways about this.
Mhm.
People are like, oh my gosh, it's going to be great because of tourism and what it brings to that corner and people being able to be in downtown 24/7. Oh my gosh, is it going to invite people that we don't necessarily want to be in our downtown?
Okay.
I don't think it's a problem. I don't see that negative side of it. I am a little bit more rose colored glasses, but really because of the level of investment that this project is, where it's located at Fourth and Market, and what other activities and attractions it will attract. I mean, economic development is the long game, right? And
Mhm.
economic development begets economic development. So this is not the only thing we're going to see in that area, in that intersection. I think we'll see a lot of other things popping up. The old Z's Oyster across the street, something's going to happen there.
Mhm.
And I expect to see a lot more activity. And that kind of positive activity kind of does chase out the unwanted negative behavior that we have seen and we don't want so much of. And I think that gets a little bit more uncomfortable for those people to be there in that space that is taken care of and watched.
I think maybe we could throw out an idea. If anybody from Churchill Downs is listening, maybe they should refuse to turn on the video board and use all that electricity until LG&E reverses their decision to vacate their
Ooh.
Okay, I'm not going to ask you about that, but suffice to say, not what you want to see on the office side, but emblematic of the other issues that we're dealing with in office space. What I'm talking about is LG&E's decision to, after many years, like 30 years, get out of their downtown presence right across
They're
from the
mid
center.
downtown.
Mid downtown?
Well, because they're going to Ninth and Broadway, which is still
Right,
downtown. 8th and
right,
Broadway,
right, right,
still
right,
downtown.
right,
I do
right.
feel a
But
little
they're
bad
already
for them,
there, so
but not
yeah.
as big a presence.
Right, right,
Right.
right. You feel a little bad for them?
Well, they're getting a lot of heat about leaving downtown,
Uh-huh.
and they're leaving the middle. So right now they're between 2nd and 3rd on Main, right across
Mm-hmm.
from the Yum Center. It's a very nice location, central location, but they're not leaving downtown. They're moving hundreds, 5 or 600 people
Mm-hmm.
to the 8th and Broadway location.
Yes.
I think that could do a lot to strengthen that corner of
Yeah.
downtown that needs a lot of
Well,
love
that
too.
end of downtown certainly,
Well,
yeah,
right. So I mean,
yeah.
I hate to say they're doing terrible things because it's not all terrible. It's also not an unusual business choice that's being made.
Yeah.
I get the argument that they are our utility and a major employer and they should still recommit to downtown. And I think they would tell us they are. I'm disappointed they're leaving the Main Street location because it is so centrally located. I also think it will get refilled.
Any scoops on that?
Not that I can
It's
tell
not
you.
on the
The
record,
next
right?
time you have me on, I will be able to tell you.
Okay. Well, let's hit a few more things before we wrap up. The mayor also seems to have a plan to reimagine the Belvedere.
Yeah.
You know anything about that and what that may mean for downtown?
It means only good things for downtown. Right now, it is kind of a funky space. If you grew up here, I know you did not grow up here. I grew up here going
Mm,
to heritage festivals and concerts on the Belvedere as a little kid, and it was hopping. I mean, there were just lots of civic
mm-hmm.
community events there, which it was a very cool space to have. I mean, unique in that you're overlooking the river is a bunch of cement.
Yeah.
They've changed it, they've improved it
Yeah.
over the years, but there's some structural questions about what's underneath it. It's a parking garage underneath it, and can you still roll up the big trucks to unload all the stage equipment and all the heavy stuff, which is why they stopped
Structural
doing that.
questions, really? I didn't
Well,
even know
for
that.
the
Wow.
big heavy trucks,
Okay.
which is why they stopped doing.
Okay.
Yeah, because
You're still safe when you go look at the river, though,
absolutely,
right?
please,
Okay.
no panic. It's the big semis, just
Uh-huh.
the big semis.
Okay.
Um, this plan, I think the reason he's putting out for RFP is because we need to figure out how to reimagine it so that it can be used again.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean doing something with the parking garage underneath? Does it mean building something else? Does it mean making this into some other more welcoming programmed space?
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a question over the years: who has programmed it? Who owns it? Who maintains it?
We don't even know who owns the
Well, we have
Belvedere?
figured this
Okay.
out,
Okay.
but only in the recent past.
Okay.
When I was still at Louisville Ford, that was like
Yeah.
a question we had to dive into, and we
Wow. What's
figured
the
it out.
answer?
The city park owns it. The parking
The parking
authority
authority?
owns it
Okay.
because they have everything underneath it.
Okay.
The city maintains it.
Okay.
Waterfront Park was programming it, but they
Okay.
have now given that to Parks. And
Okay.
Parks did a trade, so now
Louisville Metro Parks.
Metro Parks.
Wow. So there's 4 different government
Well,
agencies
Waterfront is
involved.
no longer involved, so
Okay.
it's 3 now.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
Park, facilities, and Metro Parks.
Wow. Okay.
It took a minute. It took a minute, but hey, this is what happens. I mean, that's why paperwork is really important. I believe that the mayor wants it to be something incredible, new, impactful, and different. I mean, he's very much into making unique, and they'll be announcing something soon. I've not actually been involved in the scoring of any of the RFP responses, but I hear they're really good.
Okay.
So I'm heartened because it's the terminus of Fifth Street. It overlooks the river. It
Sure.
could be a huge asset to how we
Yeah.
program downtown in general. I would love to see it
Yeah.
more green because we need more green space
Yep.
in anyway in
Yep.
downtown. But let's use it. I mean, if you can be on overlooking the river,
Yeah.
let's use that to our
Until you get
advantage.
to Waterfront Park, it's really the only place in the central business district of downtown where you can actually interact with the river.
Outside, yes.
Because of the
Yeah, that's
highway there.
true.
That's another ball of wax. Don't get me started. Okay, I promise we're not going to end with homelessness, but I do think we need to address it and
Yeah.
talk about it. It's suffice to say, still certainly a very unfortunate issue
Yep.
that we are dealing with. You need not go anywhere in and out of downtown. It's everywhere. I think the new mayor seemed to have this atop of his agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're still sort of waiting to see how those strategies
Yeah.
work out and what's different from the previous. But I will just say, as a person moving around downtown, I'm not sure I've seen much improvement, much difference. So what's being done on that front? What is your view of the efforts there and
Yeah.
what could be ahead?
So what I will tell you is better is that the encampments aren't hanging around like they were. So the encampments are being interrupted and moved.
But they just come right back.
But that is
I mean, I'm telling you, there's certain locations I can tell you off the top of my head.
oh
I
yeah,
drive by, one day they're clearing it, and
right.
in the next week,
So the city is spending a lot of resources to go
mhm,
clear them because you clean the space where they are and you clear them. The problem is they're, as you said, they're popping up somewhere else. So then the city's resources go follow them and move them. And
mhm,
in the meantime, there are resources that are trying to be connected to. That's gotten a little tougher because they're not staying in the same place for long enough always. It's a great question for the city. I would love to be, we're trying to work on a strategy It's not my wheelhouse. I don't have any money or
Right.
authority, but it really does impact downtown, like you
I was about to
said.
say it's probably a very big issue for
Yeah.
your constituency, obviously.
And I will say that it doesn't, to me, there's two ways to look at it. If your perception of safety is that you are uncomfortable, then maybe you think it's unsafe. However, it's really a matter of um, unsightly. There's a little bit of
Yeah.
unwanted behavior, but crime in downtown is very small compared to all of crime in Jefferson County. 4% of all the crime in Jefferson County is downtown. Um, some of it is petty theft, which people, I mean, I'm going to say is word of mouth, is some homeless, but not all. But I think what we need to work on is like like you said, what's the backside? We're moving people around, but let's get them somewhere where they can stabilize housing,
Mm-hmm.
get the resources they need into
Yep.
some transitional shelter. And that's what I'm hoping we can do
Yeah.
with the city.
Right. Okay. Um, and one more question I would say. Another thing I've noticed
Already?
that's
It's gone so
yeah, I
fast.
know, right? Another thing I've noticed that has changed over the long term, I think, is I mean, we were talking about office workers and the
Hmm.
character of the CBD. I think people underappreciate how much of work, uh, just the work environment in downtown ish has actually sort of shifted over to Nulu. And I was curious, do you
Hmm.
consider Nulu part of downtown?
It's a great question. Nulu is part of the greater downtown area. That's
Okay.
my very fuzzy answer for you. It
Okay.
is not part of the central
Mm-hmm.
downtown core, but for any strong downtown, you need strong adjacent neighborhoods. It is a district that I would consider one that we need to pay attention to and make sure is strong. The market is kind of taking care of Nulu. We're equally as concerned in working on Sobro to the north, or sorry, to the south,
Mm-hmm.
Russell, um, not the river.
To the west.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm trying to go around the side. Paris Town is a little further away, but
Sure.
you
Smoketown.
want
Yeah.
those strong edges. And in our downtown strategy,
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had a chance to tell you about that. That we're going to be
We didn't get to that.
we're going to be
Let's talk
releasing.
about it. Go ahead.
It's a 10-year
Uh
plan.
huh.
We do it every 10 years. The first one, well, there was one in the 60s, but 1990,
Uh huh.
we kind of revived that. That was the plan that said we need to be more than just a central business district with
Mm-hmm.
offices. The 2002 plan was let's get more downtown housing, and that's when the Downtown Housing Assistance Loan Fund came to be. That was under Mayor Armstrong. It's amazing that I was working in the city at that
Uh huh.
time. 2013 was a little bit more boots on the ground, pedestrian friendly strategies, a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, sense of place, social infrastructure, what makes
Mm-hmm.
it attractive to a place to come and be and hang
Mm-hmm.
out. Um, and then residential developments on those edges. And that will be in this plan because we don't have enough places for like the middle housing type. So row houses or tiny homes or stuff like that to be in the center of downtown. But in these edge neighborhoods, you do. So, how can we create those kinds of opportunities so that someone can live close to downtown? Because what I want is more 20 and 30 something year olds.
Mm-hmm.
This is what they want. They want to live somewhere close to cool stuff they can walk to. They want to live close to work so they can walk to that. They don't have to have a car, but to be close to cool stuff that obviously feels safe. That's foundational, but that is fun and that they can just walk around and do. I mean, do you remember when you were
Yeah, that's the
25?
dream,
Yeah,
right?
that's what we all wanted. And I think that Nulu has to be considered part of downtown for that reason.
Okay, so my last question for you. Let's say I know your job is to think about downtown all the time. Let's say I made you mayor or governor, and I gave you one thing you could do. What would you do
Wait,
uh,
for downtown or at all?
for downtown? Well, it could be at all, but I would figure that your answer would relate to downtown.
um, it's hard to say just one. I do think at this point, because it would change in points over time, and this mayor has started to do this. We need to fix our infrastructure to create from a public um, finance point of view. What should the public pay
Mm-hmm.
for? Missing curbs,
Yep.
lights that are missing or not working,
Mm-hmm.
and more of them because
Yep.
these were put in the 80s and there just wasn't
Yep.
enough. I mean, we have the
Mm-hmm.
nice decorative poles, but some of them are falling down now, and we just need
Mm-hmm.
to get more lights up, more color. Um, This sounds so elementary, but to me, the details matter. And when you, again, it goes back to when a space is taken care of and somebody knows that, oh, their attention is being spent here, someone cares about, I'm supposed to be here. I feel
Hmm.
safe here because clearly somebody is taking care of every little detail. Um, that's probably what I do today.
Would you include the street design in that? Big pet peeve of mine. Try crossing Jefferson Street. You've got 6 lanes
Yes.
one way. It's an imposing
Well, that would be
feeling
like
as a
1A.
pedestrian. Okay. Yeah.
This also isn't our
Yeah.
downtown strategy, though. So I don't want
Okay.
you to leave that out
Uh-huh.
because uh, one-way streets that are 6 lanes wide is ridiculous and nobody needs it. And it was built that way for, I mean, maybe it was built that way before automobiles so that
Hmm.
you had uh,
Yeah.
horse and carriage and that's the room you needed. But then when you pave them, it becomes a heat island and uncomfortable to cross and
Yeah.
a waste of space.
Right.
Uh,
And
w-
encourages roaring traffic
yeah,
and
it's
accidents and yeah,
correct. Yeah, that's
exactly.
very unsafe. So what we're trying to look at is where we can make two-way streets and where you can cut in the sidewalks, make them bigger, put out bump outs. If you look at the main street between 6th and 9th,
Yeah.
that was
Yep.
done in the early
Hmm.
90s. I would love to
Yep.
see that everywhere in our downtown. That would be amazing.
Yep.
And all of a sudden, people's perception of how they walk around downtown
Yep.
and how they feel
Yep.
on the street is
Still
totally
one way, but
different.
it definitely feels more pedestrian.
Well, you're
Yeah.
right. You're right about that. And I think the street deserves a different treatment depending on how big it is. I mean, it's the amount of pavement that will let you go two-way, or do you bring the sidewalks closer together?
Rebecca Fleischaker, thank you so much for doing this.
I love it.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Chris. Great
Yeah.
to be with you.